Oscar from Monkeys Audiovisual here. Today I'm taking you through the SX series EduTouch panels. Today's training is kind of like a basic introductory level training. We're going to be focusing predominantly on the Android side, focusing on the functionality that you get without connecting a PC to the panel itself. However, towards the end of the training session, we will actually connect up our PC and I'll show you the basic requirements needed to kind of get your computer screen up there and start being interactive. Let's get into it. This is an SX series EduTouch. You can see this one's mounted on the wall here. At this point in time, our panel is on. We can tell it's on because we can see something on the screen. We've got our power light down here on the bottom, and that means we're ready to go. If you ever rock up and find your EduTouch isn't on, you can press the power button in the bottom left-hand side here, or you can press the power button on the remote. Pressing either of those buttons should start up your EduTouch panel. Now, it does take around 30 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on how much stuff you've got on the panel, for it to fully start up. If you need your panel coming straight into a lesson, it's generally recommended to get it started just before all the kids rock up so you can have it ready to go, as we can see here. Now, this screen that we're looking at here, this is what we refer to as the home screen. Now, we call it the home screen because you get to it by pressing any of the house buttons located around the panel. These house icons look just like they do up the top here. You can see it's a little picture of the house. There's also a home button located pretty much smack bang in the middle of the remote. Pressing this button takes you to this screen here. Why is it handy to know about the home screen? Mostly because, as with any piece of technology, sometimes you may find yourself in a place that you don't really recognize, a screen that you're not familiar with, or someone else has used the panel and they've put it into a state that you don't quite understand. Being able to bring it back to this state that we can see here with our 4 icons across the front, it's kind of more reassuring to know that you can always get yourself back to this point should you need to in the future. So to get back to the home screen, I can press the home button on the front panel here on the buttons. I can press the home button from either of my sidebars here, and it will return me to this screen. Now, the Android functionality for the SX series EduTouch panels basically boils down to the icons that you can see in front of you here. There is a little bit more behind the scenes, and we'll touch on that as we go along. The first icon you can see here is the File button. Tapping on the File button opens up the storage that's built into the panel itself. All these little files that you can see here and all these little folders, this is actually on the panel's built-in storage. You can see up the top here where it says local storage, we have 51 of 64 gigabytes free. Underneath here, we can see our network storage integration. So you can set up a Dropbox, a Google Drive, or a OneDrive account and have it linked into the board itself. Navigating these files is pretty straightforward. If you see a file that you want to select, you can tap once. You'll notice when we've tapped once, we get a few different options down the bottom here. The most important being we can copy this folder, we can cut it, we can paste it, we can rename it, or we can delete it. If you want to see what's in a folder, you can double tap on it and you can see we're now looking in our Documents folder. At the moment, I have nothing in here and that's why it's blank. To exit the file application, we can just tap on the Home button on the front of the panel and that takes us back to our home screen here. The next application we have access to is the Whiteboard app. When the Whiteboard app starts up, you can see we have a lovely big blank page. Our pen tool is selected by default, and we're ready to go as far as drawing and annotating over what we have here on our page. With the pen tool selected, I can take my finger and I can draw on the board. Now, SX series EduTouch panels, they do support multi-touch, which is really handy if you've got a big board, you can have more than one person annotating or drawing on the screen at one time. To change how our drawing looks, we can tap the pen tool, bringing up our pen options we have here. This option we can see here, this slider, this lets us adjust the thickness. This basically changes how thick our drawing tool is. The next option we have here, we have access to a bunch of quick select colours. Once you've picked the colour that you like, you can just tap off the screen and you can see now your writing has changed. The next option that we have here is the colour picker. Moving this selector around lets us pick a custom colour. So if there's a particular colour that you're looking for, you can select that and use that on the board with your finger writing that way. EduTouch boards come with pens. Now the SX series pens actually have two writing ends. They've got a thin-tipped writing end and a thick-tipped writing end. What's handy about these is that when you're using the pen in the whiteboard application, the board can actually detect which end of the pen you're using. So if I write with my finger, you can see it's this big red pen. If I use the thick-tipped end of the pen, the board will recognise that as the same as my finger. So these two tools, the thick tip and the finger, they'll write the same way. If I swap the pen around to now write with the thin-tipped end, I can actually set this to be a different colour. Once that's done, I can swap this over and you'll see I'm now writing with two different colours, all without having to go down here and fiddle around with my annotation tools. Other tools that are built into the whiteboard application, you can see here we can choose a paintbrush tool. Now the paintbrush tool's pretty straightforward. You pick the colour that you want it to be and you'll see it kind of changes its thickness with the speed of the stroke. We also have a highlighter tool. The highlighter tool does exactly as it sounds. You can see it just draws with a transparent pen stroke. The T option here, this is for handwriting recognition. So when I write on the board using this tool, it takes my handwriting and converts it into text. That's a pretty easy way to take average looking handwriting and make it look nice and neat. The last option that we have here is our shape recognition tool. So if I pick a colour that we'll use for this, and then go to draw a shape, it takes my shape and makes it nice and neat. Again, a really easy way to take something that looks a little bit hand-drawn and make it feel a little bit more polished. It will also recognise lines, which means you can just draw a line across and it makes it nice and straight that way. Now, even though my artwork here is pretty fantastic, if I don't say so myself, I might want to erase part of what I've done. Now, if you need to erase, you don't actually have to change to the eraser tool here. So you'll see I'm just drawing with my finger, but what I can actually do is just take my palm with my drawing tool selected, and this gives me a chalk duster style eraser. So I can write and erase all without having to go down here and fiddle around with my different drawing tools. If I do want to use the eraser tool, you can see that I can select it, but the eraser tool you'll see draws a line. Now anything that line passes through, it erases that whole object. So if I wanted to get rid of just this big green squiggle here, I can just put a line through that and it just deletes that one object. So it gives you a little bit more control. Tapping on the eraser tool gives us a few more options. We can swipe right to clear, and that gets rid of everything on our whole page. If you ever accidentally delete everything on your whole page, you can tap the undo button to go back a step. The redo button just jumps forward. Shapes. Shapes are relatively straightforward. Pick a shape you want to draw. Border selects the outside colour. Fill selects the inside colour. Once we have those selected, we can tap and drag on the board, and that draws our shape on the screen. We can pick a different shape, pick a different colour, tap and drag. It's a pretty straightforward process. Once you have your shapes on screen, you can do things like draw lines between them, just in case you needed to create a flowchart or something along those lines. Now, the board also has, the SX series panel also has 3D shapes built in. These are pretty straightforward. They work the same way. You tap and drag and that sets the size of your shape. If you ever need to select anything, now that can be a shape, it could be a drawing, it could be a doodle, anything like that, you can tap on the selection tool here. You'll see it draws a line similar to the eraser tool, but all you have to do is strike through the shape that you wish to change. Now, I'm just pinching in and out to zoom this in and out. I can also rotate using the rotate handle as I'd need to. At the moment, my page is full of my, again, wonderful artwork, but I might need just a little bit more room to maybe put a few more shapes on the board. Now, giving yourself a little bit more room is pretty straightforward. That's where the zoom button comes into play. Tapping the zoom button lets you move your whole page area around. We can move up or down, or we can move left or right. With the zoom button selected, if I put 2 fingers on the board, I can pinch to zoom in and out as well. This lets me get a bit more context for what's happening on my page. The rulers tab is relatively straightforward. Tap on a ruler and it puts it on your page. We can tap on the actual ruler itself and move the ruler around. If we need to manipulate the ruler, you'll see there's little handles here. So there's the little rotate handle, and we have our close handle as well. Tap on the edge of the ruler, move your finger along, and that draws a line. It's as simple as that. Tap on the X, that closes that off. The protractor is slightly different. Here we can set our angle between our 2 little white handles here. So we might go 110 degrees. If we're happy with this, we can tap the pencil tool here, and you'll see that actually draws the angle on our screen for us. Again, tap the X, that gets rid of the protractor there. Now, at this point in time, my page is, I'm going to call it finished, and I want to move on to the next concept. To make a new page, you can tap the plus button here, and you'll see that your page number increases by 1. The plus button adds a page onto the end of your presentation. So now we're at page 2 of my 2-page presentation, as we can see down here. Tapping the plus button again, you can see now we're at page 3 of 3. You can keep adding pages pretty much as you like. Tapping on the page number here, this gives us a little PowerPoint style page overview. So we can jump from page to page just by tapping. If I really like a page, I can tap the copy button and that duplicates the page for me. If I want to get rid of some of these pages, I can hit the trash can icon and that will erase that page for me. If I want to change how my page looks, I can tap the menu option here and then choose the background button. First off, I can set my page color. These are all pretty self-explanatory. Once you like the color, you can just tap to get out of the background menu. SX series panels also have a variety of pre-loaded backgrounds. Now, these are designed to be fairly generic. They're designed to be pretty sort of multi-use. So you may not find a specific background that you're looking for within this little picture tab here. If that's the case, that's totally okay. The Customize tab lets you load in your own image resources to be used as backgrounds. That process is pretty straightforward. On your computer, you need to download the image resource you wish to use as a background. They need to be downloaded in either PNG or JPEG format. Ideally, keep the aspect ratio of the board in mind. These boards are 16 by 9 boards, and that means you want your image to fill the same aspect ratio. Once you have that image or that resource saved onto your computer, copy it onto a USB stick. When it's on a USB stick, you can plug it into the front of the board or the side of the board, depending on how your system's set up. You can tap the plus button here, and your USB will populate underneath where it says internal shared storage. You can navigate to wherever you've saved your resource and select that resource, and it will populate here for you to use in your lessons moving forward. If we're happy with our presentation and we want to come back to it later, or we're happy with our lesson, we want to come back to it later, do some drawing, make some more annotations, maybe we've got a bit more that we want to add, we need to save what we've done. So we can tap the menu option and then press save. We choose where we want our document to be saved. I'm going to save it in the Documents folder on the board. And then we tap the check mark button. From this screen here, we can see two things. The name of our file. So we might want to rename this to something like training. And we can see here as well that it uses the UBMX3 file extension. Now, this doesn't mean anything for the general users of the board. The most important thing to keep in mind is that these UBMX3 files can only be opened by the whiteboard application on these boards. There's not really anything on a computer that will open these note files. If we want to keep our document able to be edited and basically alive, we need to save it as this UBMX3 file type. So I'm going to hit confirm. If you said, okay, that's great, we've finished with our document and I want to print it off. I want to email it to someone. I want to have a copy on my computer so I can upload it to Seesaw or whatever LMS that we're using. I can tap the menu option here and then I can choose Save As. Now again, I'm going to choose the location. I'm going to choose where I save it. This could either be the internal shared storage or a USB stick that I have connected to the front of the board. Once that's done, you'll see that instead of UBMX3, I've got a bunch of different file types I can select. The most common one that people will use is PDF, because there's not too much out there that can't open PDFs. I can set the name, and when I'm happy, hit confirm, and that's going to give me a PDF document basically of my lesson or my drawings and annotations that I have on screen here. That's pretty much the ins and outs of the whiteboarding application. To get back to the home screen, we're going to hit the exit button and it takes us back here. The next application that we'll look at is the browser. Now, the browser is a web browser. There's nothing particularly different or interesting kind of about this application. It's just really handy to have a web browser built into the board. So if the board's connected to your Wi-Fi, you can actually access the internet. So if we tap Wikipedia here, you can see it will pop up and we have access to the Wikipedia page. The only thing that's worth noting really about the browser application is it does present your web pages in either the tablet or mobile view. If you don't want it to present the web pages that way in their kind of mobile format, you can tap the three dots here and you'll see there's a toggle to turn on desktop site. When you turn that on, it's going to give you the web page as it would be presented to a standard desktop computer. That can be pretty handy if you're taking your students through how to use a website in a particular fashion. To get back to the home screen again, we're going to tap the little house icon and it takes us back to our home screen here. Now, these three applications here, they're pretty much the main ways that people will use the board. There is, however, one more application that is very handy to know about. It lives in this little apps icon here. This is where kind of all the other bits of the board are kind of located. You'll see we've got our browser in here. We have an app manager, calendar, clock. There's a bunch of different things that are kind of kept in this little application folder. The one that we are interested though is eShare. Tapping on eShare opens the eShare application. Now, eShare is an application that facilitates wireless screen sharing from your device up to the board. There's a few things that you need to keep in mind. First and foremost, both the EduTouch and the device you're sharing from need to be on the same network. So you can see this panel here is connected to our 3 Monkeys AV office Wi-Fi. If you're in a school, it's going to be wireless 2.4 or wireless 5. You need to make sure both, let's say, the iPad and the EduTouch are on that same network. In terms of how the sharing works, the easiest way to share your content from your device up to the screen is using your device's built-in screen sharing service. So for Apple devices, it's called AirPlay. For Android devices, it's called Chromecast. If you're using a Windows device, you're going to be using something called Miracast. Now, in terms of getting that content up to the screen, in the case of, as an example, an iPad, you'd swipe down from the top right-hand corner and you'll see the screen mirroring button. You press that and you look for the name that we have here. This is the panel's identifier. So we've renamed this to be called Boardroom Left. When you tap on that, it's going to push the content or your screen from your iPad up to the board. Now, you can have multiple screens displaying at one time. You can have just one screen displaying. It really gives you a lot of flexibility for kids to get what's on their devices up onto the screen. In terms of a bit of setup, we can do a few things to make our life a little bit easier. If we tap on the settings button here, first thing that's worth noting is the device name. By default, that will be called eShare - a string of 4 numbers. Changing that just makes life a little bit easier for yourself and any other students you might have using the actual board itself. You'll note here there is a password option. We strongly recommend turning the password option on. The main reason for that is when someone goes to share content from their device to the board with the password mode turned on, it's going to prompt them to enter a 4-digit code into their device to enable that sharing. Without that turned on, users can just push content directly to the board and there's no real way to kind of mediate who's coming up there. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. The other settings are relatively self-explanatory. Multiple screens, this is how many devices you can have on screen simultaneously. You can see that goes up to 16 screens. So that's 16 individual iPads up on the board at any given time. Show device name on screen, that's just the name of the actual device that's actually projecting. AirPlay visible, Miracast should be set to enable, and we have Chromecast, which is turned on as well. This means that regardless of the device, anyone who's using this SX series panel will be able to push content from basically whatever they can bring into the room, provided it can get access to our network. We'll jump back to the home screen. Now, in terms of annotation, if we were looking at a web page, like this Wikipedia page here, we can actually annotate on top of whatever we have on the screen. This is facilitated through the sidebar menu here. Now, from our sidebar menu, down the bottom you can see there's a little pen tool. When you tap on the pen tool, it puts the board into annotation mode, and we can see we have our annotation toolbar over on the left-hand side here. So now when I take my finger, you can see I'm drawing on top of whatever I have on my display at this point in time. When you have annotation mode enabled, you can see multi-touch is supported, as well as our palm erasing, giving us a lot of flexibility when it comes to annotating the content on the board. Tap the pen tool, tap to change your color, and there's a slider for your thickness. Once that's done, you can see I can change the thickness of my pen in a pretty kind of easy way. Now you'll notice though, if I try to be interactive, I'm just drawing on the actual screen itself. To go back to being interactive, I need to tap on the little mouse icon here. Once that's done, I can navigate my page as I'd need to, and I can go back here, tap my pen tool, and that turns my annotations back on again. If you want to get rid of all your annotations on screen, you can tap the eraser tool, tap it again, and you can slide across and that clears everything off your page. So tap on the eraser tool, slide to clear, gets rid of everything. Now, if you are annotating on the screen and you really like the annotation that you've done and you want to save that annotation, you can tap the Save tool here. Now, the Save button gives you three options. You can save an image file. That's going to save a screenshot onto the board's internal storage. We can take a screenshot and insert it into the whiteboard application. This is probably one of the most underrated tools of the EduTouch. You can share with a QR code. This gives you a QR code on screen that you can scan with a device and get a view within your web browser on your device of that screenshot. I'm going to choose Insert into Whiteboard. Tap that on the screen, you'll see our whiteboard application opens up, and what you can actually see is it's plonked this screenshot into a blank page with our annotations on screen. From here, I could take my pen tool and I could actually write a few extra notes. I can do a bit more annotating. If I had shapes that were going to correspond, let's say to a particular idea or something like that, I could drag those around to highlight particular areas here. Inserting into whiteboard is a really good part of any presenter's workflow. I strongly recommend that people do that when it comes to annotating. Last but not least, connecting our computer. Now, this may vary depending on how your board has been set up. If as part of your installation you have a room PC that's always connected, chances are you'll never really have to go through this process. It is a handy thing to understand though, because it can help you to get a better idea of why things maybe aren't working depending on what's happening. The first thing that we need is we need a way to get our laptop screen image up to the board. Now in our case that's going to happen via HDMI. So I'm going to plug my HDMI into the front of the board here, and I'm going to plug the other end into the HDMI port on my laptop. Once that's done, I can switch over to that input. Now, I can either do that via the remote by pressing the source button in the top right-hand corner. I can press the input or source button on the panel, bringing up this screen here, or I can swipe up from the middle and then select the necessary input. It's going to take a second, and you'll see my laptop screen is now duplicated on my EduTouch. Most importantly, you'll see there's no interactivity. To get the interactive information from the board back to my laptop, I need to connect a USB cable. Now this USB cable runs from the touch output to my computer. With that done, you can see now I have full touch control over my computer. Now, what's happening here? Basically, my computer is using the EduTouch as a giant monitor. So everything I have stored on my computer, everything that I can do or access on my computer, I can do on the EduTouch. Instead of using my trackpad and my mouse though, I can use my finger. Double tap on something and it opens it up. I can tap and drag to move it around. I can tap and hold in one spot and that will give me my right-click menu. In terms of interactivity, you can see that was my right-click menu. In terms of interactivity, it's pretty straightforward. The delay you're seeing here is because of my laptop, not because of the EduTouch. So, to summarize, 2 cables are needed to connect your laptop to the board. Those 2 cables are HDMI for the picture and USB to get the touch information from the board back to the actual laptop or computer. Interactivity is pretty straightforward. A single click is a single tap on the board, so a double tap is going to be a double click. Single tap, single click, double tap, double click. Right clicking is very easy as well. We just press and hold in one spot and that opens up our right click menu. That covers all the basics of the SX series EduTouch panel. If you have any queries or questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below. If you need training on a different series of EduTouch panel, please refer to our website where we have a variety of different training videos depending on what model of EduTouch you have. They are different, they do support different features, and they all have different kind of unique aspects that make them versatile parts of any classroom. Thanks.